She cooked for her in-laws every day for 5 years, but one day she served them this and left. The kitchen was already sweltering before Camille turned on the stove. The faded ceiling fan spun with a lazy, indifferent rhythm, doing little to move the thick heat that clung to her skin. A bead of sweat slid down her temple as she stirred the agouti soup, her left hand automatically reaching for the salt, the pepper, the stock cubes. Every motion practiced, perfect. A dance she'd performed thousands of times, without applause. Through the wall, she could hear the television blaring. Someone was laughing loudly, probably Ruth, her mother-in-law. Camille's hands moved faster. She could picture the seating. Ruth sprawled across the long couch in her head wrap, phone in hand, scrolling TikTok or forwarding WhatsApp conspiracies. Her father-in-law, Leonard, quiet but always ready with criticism, probably tapping his cane against the tile, already annoyed about how long dinner was taking. And Tasha, oh Tasha, that woman's words stung more than heat ever could. Always something to say about Camille's cooking, clothes, or childlessness. Camille wiped her hands on her wrapper, adjusted the tray. On it, 3 bowls of steaming agouti soup, the oil glistening golden on top, pounded yams stacked beside them like soft, warm clouds. Her back ached, her hands burned, but her face held a trained calm. After 5 years, she'd learned how to look numb without looking dead. She stepped into the dining room. Ruth didn't look up. Tasha smirked. "Did you finally use real crayfish this time?" Leonard grunted. "Smells salty." Daniel, her husband, sat at the far end of the table, eyes fixed on his phone, oblivious. She met his gaze, hoping he'd see her, but he didn't look up. He never did anymore. Camille set the tray down gently. Then, without a word, she slipped something underneath it. A letter, neatly folded, addressed only in her own handwriting, to whom it may concern. Her hands lingered for a moment, hovering over the cloth. She looked at each of them, her husband, her in-laws, her ghosts, and saw nothing new. No gratitude, no recognition, just entitlement, routine, and resentment. She stepped back. They didn't notice. Ruth was still on her phone. Leonard was already reaching for a spoon. Tasha rolled her eyes and muttered something Camille didn't care to hear. She turned, walked quietly back into the kitchen, and leaned against the counter. Her chest rose and fell in deep, deliberate breaths. She had cried all her tears long ago. Now, only resolve remained. Tonight would be the last time she cooked in this house, and by the time they found that letter, she'd be gone. Let me know when you're ready for Section 2, character backstory and present setup, and I'll start building it right away. Camille used to be the kind of woman who lit up a room without trying. Quiet, yes, but never invisible. Back in college, she was known for her sharp mind and gentle confidence. She'd studied marketing, finished top of her class, and landed a job at a growing agency right after graduation. Her future looked bright, filled with plans, with freedom, with love. And for a while, it seemed like those dreams were coming true. She married Daniel, her college boyfriend. He was calm, focused, a bit quiet like her. She thought they understood each other. She thought they were building a life together. But marriage didn't turn out the way she imagined. After the wedding, things shifted. At first, it was small. A comment from his mother here, a cold glance there. Camille brushed it off. She wanted to belong. She tried harder, stayed polite, helped with chores, made meals. When Daniel's mother, Ruth, suggested she stop working for a while to focus on family, Camille hesitated. But Daniel said, "It's just for a bit. You can go back later." Later never came. 1 month became 6. 6 became 5 years. Camille's days were spent in the kitchen, in the market, ironing shirts, folding clothes, pretending not to hear when Ruth criticized, "Your stew is always too watery. You don't pound yam like a real woman." Camille swallowed her hurt and kept stirring. She wanted peace. She didn't want to be like other women who fought with their in-law. She told herself, "This is just a phase. Things will get better." They didn't. Daniel grew more distant. He poured everything into at home. He was present, but never really there. If Ruth made a rude remark, he'd look at his phone. If Camille tried to talk to him about her feelings, he'd say, "You're too sensitive." If she cried, he'd leave the room. And the worst part, when she miscarried just 8 weeks in, there were no tears shed for her, not even Daniel's. Ruth didn't even ask if she was okay. She just said, "These things happen, you'll try again." But Camille wasn't ready to try again. Not for a baby, not for anything. Something inside her had broken that day, and no one noticed. She spent hours alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she got here. This wasn't love. This wasn't a home. This was a cage dressed like a family. Tasha, Daniel's younger sister, didn't make it easier. She had moved back in after a failed marriage and brought her bitterness with her. She mocked Camille's past job, her big city dreams, calling them useless now that she was just a housewife. Camille stopped talking about anything personal. It was safer that way, but in the quiet corners of the night, Camille wrote. In a worn leather journal hidden beneath her underwear drawer, she poured out her pain, page after page of sadness, anger, and memories of the woman she used to be. A woman who had dreams of opening her own business. A woman who once laughed without fear of being judged. A woman who believed in love. That woman hadn't died. She was only waiting. And one morning, Camille woke up and didn't feel numb. She didn't feel broken. She felt done. Done with begging for respect. Done waiting to be seen. Done hoping Daniel would defend her. Done shrinking herself to fit into a house that never made room for her. So she started planning, quietly, carefully. She opened a new bank account. She reached out to her cousin in Atlanta, who offered her a place to stay. She updated her resume and applied for jobs. Small ones at first, just enough to start. Each step gave her strength. Each small act of reclaiming her life became fuel. She didn't tell anyone, not yet, but her journal entries changed. They were no longer filled with questions. They were filled with decisions. Camille had spent 5 years serving meals, swallowing insults, and waiting for permission to live her life. Now she knew. She didn't need anyone's permission, not anymore. Dinner that night felt like every other. Camille placed the dishes on the table, then quietly sat at the far end. The smell of jollof rice, grilled fish, and fried plantains filled the room. Ruth looked at the food but didn't say thank you. Tasha was already picking at her plate. Daniel didn't glance her way. As everyone began eating, Ruth cleared her throat. You know, at your age, most women have at least one child. Her voice was loud and sharp. But 5 years? Nothing. Maybe it's time Daniel found someone who can give us a grandchild. Camille froze. Tasha laughed, adding, or maybe Camille's just too focused on her cooking. All that food, and still no baby. The words stung more than they should have. They weren't new, but tonight, something cracked open. Camille didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't look up. She simply placed her fork down, stood from the table, and walked out. Nobody followed her. Nobody asked if she was okay. In the kitchen, the lights felt colder. She moved slowly, opening the lower cabinet, pulling out the last tray she had hidden hours ago. On it sat nothing but a clean white napkin, and underneath, a thick envelope. She placed the tray on the counter and opened the envelope. Inside were 4 items. Her divorce papers, already signed. A personal letter to Daniel. A second letter addressed to Ruth, Samuel, and Tasha. And a final note. Short, direct. A resignation from the role they forced her into. No longer the cook. No longer the cleaner. No longer their silent shadow. She took a deep breath, folded the papers carefully, and slid them beneath the napkin on the tray. She covered everything like she had done 1,000 times before. But this time, it wasn't food she was serving. It was truth, final and cold. She looked around the kitchen one last time. The stove she cleaned every day. The dishes she washed before anyone ever asked. The pantry she filled without thanks. The space where she lost herself. Then she turned off the light and walked out. The next morning, the house was unusually quiet. The table was still full of plates from the night before. The food untouched. Camille's phone was off. Her clothes were gone. The only thing she left behind was that tray. When Ruth lifted the napkin, the silence in the room grew heavy. Daniel picked up the first letter, his name written in her handwriting. He opened it and read, his face growing pale with each line. Tasha grabbed the second letter. Her smirk faded. Ruth stood still, her eyes scanning the page like it was written in another language. Camille didn't yell. She didn't pack in the middle of the night. She didn't slam the door. She just left. And in the end, her silence was louder than any scream they could have imagined. Ruth was the first to speak. She slapped her palm on the table so hard that the water glasses shook. "Ungrateful girl," she hissed. "After everything we did for her, we gave her a roof, a family, and this is how she repays us? With letters and shame." Tasha didn't seem too bothered. She leaned back in her chair, picked her teeth with a toothpick, and laughed. She was never built for this life. Let her go. She was just playing house. Daniel sat frozen, Camille's letter still in his hands. His eyes scanned it again. as if reading it a second time would change the words. He looked around the room, hoping someone would say it was a joke, that she would walk back in any second, laugh, and say she was just blowing off steam, but she didn't come back. The hours passed, then the day, still nothing. Daniel tried calling, texting, emailing, no reply. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media pages were empty. It was like she had vanished. Camille hadn't vanished, though. She was lying on a small mattress in her friend Kioma's spare room, staring at the ceiling and breathing freely for the first time in years. The room was plain, white walls, no pictures, just a lamp, a chair, and a window that let in soft afternoon light, but it felt safe. Kioma had hugged her tight without asking too many questions. She didn't need explanations. She had seen the quiet sadness growing in Camille's eyes for years. The first night, Camille didn't sleep much. Her body was tense, her thoughts restless. But by morning, something shifted. She rose early, made tea, and sat by the window. She opened her laptop and began to write. Not just thoughts, stories. She wrote about a woman who gave everything to a family that never saw her. She wrote about a kitchen filled with silence. She wrote about heartbreak that didn't scream, but bled slowly, drop by drop. In the following days, she enrolled in a writing class at the community centre. She found a part-time job at a small bookstore nearby. She called her sister for the first time in months. They talked for hours, laughed, cried, remembered who they used to be before life got too loud. As she rebuilt her life, memories kept flooding in. Not soft ones, but sharp ones. One night, she remembered how Daniel used to brush her ideas aside, how he once laughed when she told him about her dream to launch a small digital marketing firm. "You think anyone will take you seriously," he had said. "You're not built for that stress." She remembered the day Ruth took her grocery list and rewrote it in front of 2 guests, loudly saying, "This is why my son has lost weight. She doesn't even know how to buy tomatoes." She remembered the moment she lost the baby. She had been alone in the bathroom, blood on her hands, the ache in her belly stronger than anything she'd ever felt. She had whispered for Daniel, but he didn't come. When she told Ruth what happened, Ruth didn't hold her, didn't ask if she was okay. She had simply said, "Women lose babies all the time. Stop making it a tragedy." That moment never left her. The silence, the coldness, the weight of loss that only she had carried. Now, in her new space, Camille began to see herself clearly, not as a failure, not as weak, but as someone who had survived, quietly, bravely, patiently. Daniel, back at the house, couldn't accept it. He called Camille's sister, trying to find out where she was. He left voicemails, some angry, some begging. One night, he even showed up at her old workplace, hoping someone had heard from her. When none of that worked, he turned to guilt. "You're breaking this family," he said in one message. "Do you even care what this is doing to us?" But Camille didn't reply. She read his message, let it sit in her chest for a few minutes, then deleted it. She didn't feel rage. She didn't feel sad. She felt distance. And that was enough. Because now, when she looked in the mirror, she saw someone rising. Not broken, not bitter, just free. The room was quiet except for the soft tapping of fingers on laptop keys. The writing class had just started. Camille sat near the window, focused, her notebook open, pen resting on the edge. She had found peace in that space, a quiet circle of strangers who saw her as a writer, not a wife or a daughter-in-law. Then the door opened. Danielle walked in. At first, no one noticed. He looked out of place, stiff in a suit, eyes searching. When he spotted Camille, he walked straight to her, his steps fast and unsure. The room turned silent. "Camille," he said, breathing hard like he had been running. "Please, can we talk?" She didn't move. Her pen stayed on the table. Around her, heads turned, curious eyes watching. "I didn't know what I was doing," he said, his voice cracking. "You should have told me you were unhappy." Camille stood up slowly. Her classmate sat frozen, unsure if this was part of an exercise or something very real. She looked Daniel in the eye and said calmly, "Told you." He swallowed. "We can fix this." She gave a sad smile, not cruel, just tired. "Fix what? A life I never agreed to live? I married you, Daniel, not your silence." Someone in the back gasped softly. Daniel reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Please," he whispered, "come home." "I am home," she replied. "I built it for myself." Daniel stood still. His face fell. He looked smaller somehow, like someone seeing a reflection they didn't recognize. The instructor politely cleared his throat. "Sir, we're in the middle of class." Daniel nodded, embarrassed. "I'm sorry." He turned and walked out, his shoulders low. Camille sat down again. She picked up her pen. Her hands were steady. The next day, Camille clicked publish on her latest blog post. It was the final piece in a series she had been writing privately. She titled it, "The Things I Was Never Allowed to Say at Dinner." She wasn't expecting anything. Maybe a few comments. Maybe some quiet support. But within hours, the post started spreading. Hundreds of shares. Then thousands. Readers began quoting her words. "I was not born to serve in silence. A woman who swallows pain daily is still starving. You can't call it love when it only speaks in demands." Camille's name wasn't hidden anymore. Her face was now attached to truth. She wasn't anonymous. She was real, seen, heard. Back in her old home, Ruth found the post on her church's group chat. Women she barely knew were sharing it, praising it, saying it spoke to their own lives. At first, Ruth didn't understand. Then she saw the byline. Her lips tightened. She threw the phone on the couch. "How dare she?" she spat. "Lies!" But deep down, even Ruth knew it wasn't lies. Tasha read the post too, and though she rolled her eyes, a quiet jealousy grew inside her. Camille had said everything she had never had the courage to say. And Daniel, he read it again and again, hoping to find something redeeming, something to hold on to. But all he saw was the truth he ignored for years. One line echoed in his mind over and over. He loved peace more than he loved me. He couldn't sleep after that. Meanwhile, Camille's inbox flooded with messages from women in different cities, different lives, all saying the same thing. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." She didn't respond to all of them. She didn't have to. Her silence was no longer forced. It was chosen. For the first time in years, Camille's voice had become louder than the room that once drowned her out. Camille woke up every morning without an alarm now. The sun filled her little room, warm and soft. She would sit with her tea, open her laptop, and write. Her blog had grown fast. Women from all over shared their own stories in the comments. They thanked her for giving pain a voice. Camille didn't try to be perfect. She just wrote honestly about silence, about being overlooked, about walking away. A small online magazine reached out to her after reading one of her posts. They offered her a job as a part-time content editor. She accepted. It wasn't about money. It was about purpose. Every article she shaped, every story she helped bring to life, reminded her that her voice mattered. She also started going to therapy once a week. At first, she didn't know what to say. She'd spent years ignoring her feelings. But slowly, with each session, she started peeling back the layers. She talked about her miscarriage, about the nights she cried in the kitchen, about the way Daniel's silence made her feel smaller than she ever thought possible. Therapy didn't erase the past, but it helped her breathe through it. She spent a lot of time alone, and she began to like it. She would take walks, sit in parks with her notebook, visit bookstores, or just cook small meals for herself. Cooking used to feel like a duty. Now, it was a gift she gave herself. She no longer waited for praise. She praised herself. Meanwhile, Daniel's world grew quiet in a different way. He still lived in the house, but it felt empty. Ruth and Tasha barely spoke. Meals were tense. Everyone had read Camille's blog. His co-workers whispered behind his back. His manager had even asked if he needed time off. His focus had dropped. His reports were late, and his presentations lacked spark. He used to think keeping peace meant staying silent. Now he saw that silence can hurt more than words. He reread Camille's letters, especially the last line. "One day, you'll wish you had spoken for me before I learned to speak for myself." He did wish that. Every day. Ruth never said it out loud, but the guilt followed her like a shadow. Women from her church had stopped calling. Some had even defended Camille in group chats. She pretended not to care, but every time she passed Camille's old room, she felt something twist inside. Camille was the only one who ever offered to make Ruth tea without being asked. The only one who ever remembered her favorite fabric store. The only one who listened without judging. And now she was gone. Not just from the house, but from all their lives. Still, Ruth wouldn't apologize. Pride was too heavy to put down. Camille didn't wait for an apology. She didn't need one. Her life was moving forward, soft, steady, and strong. And for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged exactly where she was. The cafe was quiet, just the way Camille liked it. Soft music played in the background. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. She sat by the window with her favorite tea, watching people pass by outside. At the table next to hers, a young couple talked in low voices. The woman looked upset, but she spoke calmly. The man leaned in, really listening. Camille watched them for a moment, not with sadness, but with peace. It reminded her of the kind of love she used to hope for, one where voices were heard, not ignored. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from a reader. "Your words saved me. Thank you for speaking for so many of us." Camille held the phone in her hand for a moment, feeling the weight of it, not heavy but meaningful. She smiled softly and set it down. She reached into her bag and pulled out her laptop. The screen lit up. A blank page, a blinking cursor. She stared at it, calm and steady. This story wasn't about Ruth or Daniel or the pain they left behind. This one was about her. Camille began to type, her fingers moving without fear, without apology. And somewhere deep inside, she felt full, not from food, not from praise, but from the quiet joy of choosing herself. "I cooked for them, every day for 5 years, but one day, I finally served myself." Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. Bye.